I'm the Director of Disability Services.
And I'm Lauren Tornatori. I'm the Senior Assistant Director for Disability Education and Enhancement.
And welcome today. We're going to talk with you a little bit about the Disability Services Office here, as well as just some things that, actually I can move over to the agenda, as well as some of the things that we can help you with thinking at the beginning of the summer, how to make sure that this transition can be smooth and successful for your student and for you. And I don't know if there are students here. We love when there are students here, but it might just be helpful parents. So we kind of talk as if we're talking to the student, and that's how we do talk to the students when we're engaging with them. So you'll kind of see that. But I'm going to get going here. I like to start this conversation with this letter. It was written a few years ago from somebody who is somebody well known in the higher education disability field. Her name is Janie Jarrow. And this is a letter that she wrote after she experienced sending her daughter with disabilities to college. And I'll just read a couple of snippets to you, and then we have the rest of the letter attached. But she said, "And now as I prepare to pack her up and take her off to college in the fall, I recognize that this role has ended for me, and the word anxious doesn't even begin to describe my feelings. If you are worried that your child with a disability will have a difficult time making a successful transition to college without your involvement, then you're probably right to be worried. Very few children with disabilities could succeed at the college level. On the other hand, students with disabilities survive and thrive on college campuses across the country. If you still think of your son or daughter or your child as your child, and they still are comfortable in accepting that role, it's time to take a careful look at where you have come from and what lies before you. As parents, it's time for us to step back and encourage, gently nudge our students with disabilities to assume significant independent responsibility for their own lives, both academically and personally."
Just want to pause there. This is what's showing on
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm not progressing. Okay, I'm going to do it differently then. Okay. What about this? Is that showing?
Yep, now that's
Okay.
showing.
Oh, I'm reading to you. Here we go. All right. We're shaking off the rust a little bit. Okay. There is no doubt that I can explain these things more fully than my daughter can explain them or even understands them. And it doesn't matter. Much as I hate it, I know that she has to be the one to convey all this crucial information, not me. And while this may be your last chance to convey all that important information onto the college, it's your students with disabilities' first chance to convey that information all by themselves. Don't spoil the opportunity. Don't interfere. So we're going to help today. We're going to help talk this through. First, I'm going to give you a little overview of who we got in our office. So I'm here today and Lauren is here today. Brandon is our associate director, and he's also our assistive technology specialist. And Evelyn is our, Brandon is the manager of assistant technology. Evelyn is our specialist, and she's the one who really is kind of the front face, who does a lot of the first meetings with students and develops those relationships, especially with first year students as they're entering. So she's somebody that your students most likely will meet with, although depending on schedules, they could meet with us as well. And Ida is the person who's, we call her kind of the wizard behind the screen. She's the one who is answering emails to the disability emails. She's answering the phone. She's helping guide people and answer questions. So Ida is sort of the concrete that holds us all together. I like to give a little bit of statistics as people have asked them over time. I also, for those of you that just popped in, we are recording today. We will have time for Q&A. I just can ask you to consider that if you do want to ask a question, that you try to keep a little bit confidential in terms of information that you share. We will have time, lots of time at the end for Q&A. Okay, so the stats. So we have about 9% of the student body, undergraduate student body, is registered with us, and it's rising. We're pretty much a revolving door. We're not a set cohort by any means. Students can register with us really at any time. They can register with us this summer before they come here, which is what we love. Or they can register with us the last semester of their senior year or anywhere in between. So as of spring, this past spring, we had 1,167 totally registered with us, and about 86 of them are undergraduate, but the graduate rates are rising, which is makes sense as more and more students complete their college with accommodations and move forward. So if your student were to, move forward with us post undergraduate, if they were here, they could continue with their accommodations. And if they go elsewhere, we can help them make sure that they can have what they need to secure their accommodations elsewhere. As far as breakdown by school, our students cover all of the schools, and they're pretty within ratio of just the general size of each of these schools. The health sciences school just is the smallest school. It's a more intimate major, while the FOSS, the fine arts and human and health services, actually is just a giant school because it covers so many different majors. But our students are pretty well represented across the board. The pie chart is one of my favorites to talk about. I've been in this field for 20 years, and this pie chart has changed so much, and it continues to change every year. So the bottom red piece of pie that was learning disabilities probably used to be about half of students that were registered with a disability office, even about 10 years ago. And now, as you can see, it's in third place, and I think that's pretty typical of what we're seeing for students who are registered with us across the board at any institution. It doesn't mean that students have fewer learning disabilities. It just means that more and more students are being diagnosed with ADHD or psychological conditions that are perseverative throughout their young adulthood and are registering for accommodations. Students are also able to overlap, so they can let us know if they are diagnosed into multiple categories. So we can't quite separate those out necessarily. So a lot of these, are partners, as you might know. But one of the biggest phenomenons I think that we've seen is women with ADHD. We have a lot of females registering with us with ADHD and older in their careers too. So that's a new category that we've really been seeing with students. And I think that that's also happening in K-12. They're being seen and noticed and diagnosed earlier. So, that has been one of the biggest ADHD increase in areas. So we can answer any questions you have about that in a little bit, but we're going to keep going forward, and I'm going to pass this over to Lauren.
Thanks. I know some of you were just asking about if this will be recorded. I did put that in the chat, and hopefully we can get you our YouTube page in the chat by the end of this conversation. We're going to take a little bit of a shift in our conversation right now just to talk about really the crux of the work that we do at the higher education level, which is focusing on providing access. That is different than services in high school, where services in high school provide both access and modifications. We do not typically provide modifications at the college level. So what do we mean by access exactly? Really, the spirit of access is to be included in the curriculum. It's really about us working with a student to find the appropriate avenues to opt in to all components of their academic experience. Accommodations are not meant for a student to opt out or to waive things that are required of them. And that's not just an arbitrary thing that our office has decided. That really is the spirit of the law, and also has to do with, accreditation requirements for programs, graduation requirements. One of the examples I always use is I don't think I would want to go to the hospital and be treated by a nurse who is able to waive certain parts of their licensure requirement. Or we have a nuclear reactor here. We need to make sure everyone is doing that safely. So, there are certain components that we aren't able to modify in the same way that may have been able to be modified in high school. If I give a couple of examples of what we mean by access, one would be, as I mentioned earlier in the chat, providing captioning and other accessible course materials, or making sure that we have elevator access in our buildings. A modification, for example, would be things like, I'm going to choose the third one this time as an example, since it's come up a lot recently, students being able to choose to do a paper rather than a presentation. We know that COVID has made a lot of people fearful of presentations, but in many courses that can be a learning objective that needs to be met. So it's really about working with students and finding their resources to be able to fulfill those requirements rather than take them away. Another thing that comes up that we just want to address up at the top is really the meetings that students have with our office. And oftentimes we get asked, why is it that you don't, have other people as a part of these meetings, such as, a parent, another support person. I've even had a student ask if like their roommate could be a part of their meetings. And there's certainly different aspects of that. Obviously the students' rights do transfer over to them upon graduation or the age of 18. So we do want to respect that as an adult. But I think there's a lot of other things within that as well in terms of our mission as an office. We do want to reduce disability stigma. And one of the ways of doing that is to allow the person with the disability to have that primary voice and be the driver of that situation rather than, sitting back and allowing someone else to speak for them in a meeting. And that's important too, to let us be able to develop a relationship with that student. I found in the past sometimes when others are involved in the meeting, typically the student kind of sits back, waits for that other person to speak for them, and then we're not really getting a chance to develop that relationship. It's also about the student really being able to have a thoughtful conversation, a guided conversation with us in consideration of what accommodations are actually relevant for them as they move through their college career. And those are conversations that sometimes can be more challenging when other people are suggesting things that maybe they don't really benefit from. Students also then are able to learn and express their own strengths and challenges. Oftentimes an IEP or a 504 is someone else's opinion of what that student's experience is. And although that can be relevant, we also want to know from that student's direct perspective how they feel their disability will affect them, so that we can help, provide the different avenues to success while they're here at UMass Lowell. And then finally, is their name on the degree? And we want them to be able to drive their own education. So that is some reasons. We do have some other things in the family section of our website as well. And this kind of leads into a conversation about really developing that important skill of self-advocacy. We know that students are starting to develop their voice as adults while they're here in college. And that shift can be scary, it can be unexpected, and it can feel burdensome. But it's definitely something that all students, regardless of if they're registered with our office or not, are experiencing as they make the transition to college. We are a large decentralized urban campus, and many students will struggle with things like managing tasks, traveling throughout campus, keeping track of their grades, maintaining that work-life balance. But as students start to mature here at the university, advocating for themselves can be empowering and also helps prepare them for the world of work. Many students here have jobs, internships, co-ops while they're here as a student, and that can be a really powerful experience for them. Some ways that we can certainly help assist students who are registered with our office, we can help them learn to communicate about their disability with their instructors and also other campus community members. Students do practice those things with us in our office. So, we don't expect them to just go out on their own. They certainly can utilize us if they want to. We can also help a student develop their organization style. I work with a lot of students who will say, well, oh, I just type things into my phone. And that can be a great thing, but there are apps out there that are specifically designed for students. They're a little bit less labor intensive. So sometimes we're going over that. And I have lots of students who love to use a paper planner because they love the physical aspect of crossing something off. So, we work with students to find their style and then become independent with it. Our goal is really for students to be independent as they make that progress towards their degree and beyond too, as they go into the world of work. How do students register with our office? Obviously, this is the main question that comes up for everyone. So it is a 3-step process, with step 4 being an ongoing step. So the first step is for the student to fill out what we call the public accommodation request form. That is a form on our website. These links are active in this presentation, and this presentation will be sent to you all after today, so you will be able to have a copy of it. That form is really the student's first chance to identify themselves, but also to write out for themselves, this is what I think I might struggle with. These are the things I'm nervous about. You know, it gives us a little piece from the student. At the end of the public accommodation request form, there is a place where a student can upload documentation pertaining to their disability. We have many different ways that students can provide documentation. I believe we're going to put a link in the chat. What happens is once we have the public accommodation request form and the documentation, we then review those things as a team. And then we reach out to the student via their UMass email in order to either say, maybe we need something a little bit differently and we'll provide guidance there, or more likely we're going to reach out to them to say that they need to schedule their intake appointment. An intake appointment is a one-on-one meeting with one of us and the student. And that's really where we figure out, you know, what accommodations are going to make sense as a starting point. And we also orient them to other things that are related to our office. And we do give them a little preview of what orientation is like. And we talk about some really important resources. The student does walk away, actually they get it prior to the meeting, but we go over what we call a student resource guide during that meeting. So everything is laid out for them ahead of time. They have a copy of that and they can refer back to it at any time after the meeting as well. Step 4 is that ongoing step. So that is where the student just needs to send accommodation letters to their faculty each semester. It's always their choice who they send it to. We do send out email reminders typically right before the semester begins, a little bit around midterms and a little bit around finals to remind people to send those letters. We also do have a monthly newsletter where we have that as the top reminder at the beginning. So we don't expect students to memorize that, but it is something that they need to choose to do each semester. And now I'll hand it back over to Jody.
Okay, now that we've scared you that you're sending your student out into the wild to scary people like us, let's see if we can talk through a little bit and unpack a little bit about sort of, okay, what can you do this summer to kind of get in the mode for this? So we would really encourage family members to sit with their students and really think through some of this over the summer. So one of the very first things is to really just get around our website. It's included in our links. It's included in the slides that I have, and we always tell students that you just Google UML disability and it'll get you to us. But really just getting familiar with some of the different sections on it. We have a for family section that I put on there. We have a for students section. We have a for faculty section, you know, so there's just, how do we talk to faculty? That's cool. You know, and so, you know, to kind of look around that. Also on our website, looking at those documentation requirements and figure out what the best fit is. We've rearranged this page so it says, I have this type of disability. So these are the types of documentation that might qualify you. We've really tried to break it down and make it kind of as manageable as possible. We don't want getting the documentation and providing that to us to be like, you know, a big issue for students. But one thing that not everybody thinks to do is actually before you send it to us, sit down with that documentation together. Some students have never read their neuropsychological evaluation or their IEP or their 504, and they really don't really know their own strengths and challenges. When I worked in a high school, and Lauren's worked in a high school as well, you know, we sat in on IEP meetings, and up until somebody was 16, they weren't even required to attend. And sometimes it would be a really contentious meeting around a table, and then between 16 and 18, they'd come in for 5 minutes and everyone would just smile and be like, great job, Johnny, go back to science, because they checked a box that Johnny attended the meeting. And then, you know, by 18, Johnny would sit at the table maybe the whole time, except that like it sounded like they were in Spanish because they had no language for sort of all this IEP conversation. So sitting down with your student and helping them understand, where are their strengths, where are they going to expect challenges. So often we hear from students, and we're really good at breaking this down with them, but so often we hear, I don't know, I just went to that other room to take tests. Somebody came and told me it was time to go to that other room, and they don't really have that understanding of what that really meant for them and why that was important and helpful. You know, and so reviewing documentation together and practicing talking about we want to know your strengths. We're going to ask the student their strengths. A lot of people do, but we don't want to be negative. We want to know what they're good at. Why did they come to college? But we also need to know what are the barriers that come up for them. And then when the student is filling out our online form, we call it the PARF, that we want the students' fingers as much as they are able on the keyboard, or they can use, you know, speech to text, but we want the student to be the driver of answering these questions. And they are supposed to have that UML email to be able to start that, and to do that, it goes right into their account from the beginning. That doesn't mean that you can't be sitting in the chair next to them and they look over and say, well, what should I say here? And then you can take a moment and talk about, well, you remember when, you know, you used to need to have, you know, this from your instructor. So you can be there. We would like you to be next to them, but not the one who's writing these things. We want them to be the one who's writing it. You can also really work together to make sure that they're have access to and are really regularly checking their email. This is a big upheaval for students and in our world, like we check email every 2 seconds. And so like, I don't really know why this is a giant change, except when at one point a student showed me what their email looks like. And it is like a deluge every day. Like they get emails from us. They get emails from their instructors, sometimes directly, sometimes from the portal. Sometimes they get emails from their advisor. Sometimes they get email from Residence Life. Sometimes they get emails from the dining hall. They get emails from this club and that club. And it's really unwieldy. And so trying to help them figure out, like, how are you going to know how to scan this and prioritize this and make sure that things don't get missed? So really thinking about that can be something to think about over the summer. Also, we provide a list of questions, which we'll share with you to the student to kind of prepare for the intake meeting. But sometimes, you know, we have students that come in with a little note card and it says, my mom really wanted me to ask about this, so I'm going to ask about this, you know, and that's okay. Like, what questions do they have? What things do they want? Even if it isn't really disability services, we can sometimes say, oh, you know what? That is a really good question. We're gonna, you know, send an email over to your advisor with you attached so that we can find out about that math class that you have a question about. So, you know, we can kind of be a point person for them. So these are some of the questions that we always ask. We send it out in the email when they've booked their intake meeting. What challenges have you faced academically? The questions that we ask them, we don't really ask it to them in really legalese. We ask it to them, tell me what it's like when you're taking a test. What does it feel like for you? What works, what doesn't? What kind of tests work, what kind of tests don't? Tell me what it feels like when you're sitting in class and someone's talking at you and just giving you new information. Let's unpack that a little bit. Tell me what it's like when you're at home and you're trying to figure out how to separate your homework out and when to do your homework. So we ask them questions that are them. They're the only ones who can really say what it feels like to them and what experiences they have. And then we really unpack that together to try to figure out what their unique kind of accommodation package looks like. We do ask them what strengths they have. What accommodations have they had in the past? There's sort of a myth. There's like 2 myths. There's a myth that I had accommodations in high school, so now I have them in college. That's one myth, and it's true. And the other myth is like the absolute opposite of it, which is somebody has told you, oh, none of your accommodations that you had growing up are going to apply in college, and that's not really true either. You know, the fact of the matter is students get what they need, right? We believe in equity, so students get what they need. It may look different on the college level, but it should, if they were getting what they needed in high school, they will get what they need here. You know, so it may be packaged differently. So for example, if a student has testing accommodations, I often tell students in their intake meeting, you know, you walked into high school in September and someone told your teacher that you had accommodations, and then the teacher just kind of knew about that and took care of it. Well, now when you have a test coming up, you have a certain specific responsibility to make sure that arrangements have been made so that your accommodations happen for that test. If you've sent your letter to your instructors that we've created, you don't have to ask for your accommodations, but you have to arrange the logistics, because sometimes the instructors can do a testing accommodations on site nearby in the classroom, but we also have testing centers. It's confusing. We have 2 testing centers for different majors and different sides of campus. And so which testing center are you going to use and how do you book that? You know, and we can talk with them about that, but they have a responsibility over that. So that's just different. And so really thinking about that, thinking about what accommodations are going to be helpful for them moving forward. There's a lot of times where students have a very big laundry list from high school that they say, yeah, I mean, I didn't end up using like a lot of these things, or they were there just in case. And so we want to unpack that and understand which are the real access needs that they have. And then just that, like I said, if there's anything else that they want to ask, or they want us to know, or want us to know about themselves that we don't already know. Okay. Is this you again, Lauren? All right. I'm gonna get Lauren back in.
Yeah, I added stuff to the chat while you were gone. Don't be alarmed. So we're gonna shift gears a little bit away from registering with our office and getting into some other aspects that we know students run into in terms of setting them up for success. One thing that we do have embedded in this slide is we did find from Landmark College a really good, quick and easy assessment about assessing college readiness. I think that can be important for students to take a look at, or for you all to take a look at together, to see what are some areas that they might need to work on or think about as they enter the fall semester. In terms of some other things that come up for a lot of students, one would be planning out the semester. I emphasize with students a lot when I meet with them, you do need to look at the academic calendar and look at those dates. We are a state-run institution. There's going to be at least one Monday holiday where you're not going to have class, but those Monday classes are then going to be on Friday one week. And you're either going to go to the wrong place or not show up to class. It happens. And so getting those important dates in your calendar can be a good thing ahead of time so that students are prepared for those holidays or closures or things like that. Also thinking about organization, what will work best? Is it their phone? Is it something physical? Is it a big, I'm referring to a wall here, one of those like whiteboard calendars. I've had students use those and take a picture of it and bring it into my meeting. So just thinking about what their style is. Also familiarizing themselves with things like Blackboard, that is our online learning management system. SIS, that is how students register for their classes. Outlook, that is our email system. And OneDrive, so that is basically a cloud-based system where students can save documents and share with other people. So those are kind of the basic pieces of technology that sometimes can be very new for students as they transition here. Also considering a course load. Many students, especially as they're coming in as freshmen, they're going to be going through orientation if they haven't already, or they are right now as we speak, and they're going to be getting their fall class semester schedule. I think it's important to take a step back and consider that and look at what is a reasonable amount of courses to take. I would rather someone always start off a little bit slower and get their feet underneath them so that they're able to get used to campus, rather than overloading themselves with too many credits and then having to withdraw from a class or having to take it over. So just thinking about whether that makes sense. The reduced course load piece we do talk to students about during their intake meeting a little more in depth. In terms of conversations with faculty, again, as Jody just mentioned, students are going to be expected to communicate with their faculty about a variety of things. Maybe it can be good to role play, how are you going to talk about yourself in your accommodation letter? If you're sick or you miss a deadline or you're unprepared, and those things happen, we're human. How are you going to have that conversation? I can say ignoring it and just staying in your room and hoping that it goes away is not going to be a good coping strategy. Also there, again, communication, looking at who are those important people that you might need to email. What are the office hours for their faculty? Things like that they can get a sense of from their syllabi that will be important. Also looking at who's on their success team and how those folks can help. So again, their instructors, obviously directly, our office, the Centers for Learning or class office, they provide tutoring, success coaching, advising, and they also run the test proctoring centers. So they're a big piece of most students' success here on campus. Counseling is another thing that may come up for students. They run both one-on-one as well as small group sessions for students, and other supports depending on, different interest groups that a student might be in. Athletics has a student success center. Is that an avenue for a student? Are they part of the honors college? Are they part of a living learning community? Are they within Riverhawk Scholars? Looking at some of those pieces at the university, who are the folks that you can reach out to when you're struggling? I think it's important to know that before, you get on campus. Just a few more things. There's lots of things to talk about outside of just academics. Is a student going to be interested in joining a club or going on an outdoor adventure? Are they going to be working? Having a conversation about what a reasonable amount of time is to commit to those activities. And honestly, a conversation ahead of time of if you need to pull back. This has happened with many students. During finals, you might need, how are you going to communicate with your boss that you need your schedule to look different, and having that conversation ahead of time. Other areas to consider would be things like if a student has ongoing appointments or medications, how are they going to schedule those appointments? How are they obtaining refills? How are they storing their medication? Do they know how to independently communicate with their provider in their pharmacy? That's something that comes up for many students as they begin here. Again, reminder systems. Do they want text messages? Students can sign up for text message reminders for appointments with our office as well as the test proctoring center. So that's an option. Do they need to set alarms or things like that on their phone? Bookmarking important pages. So again, Blackboard, our page for Accommodate, or maybe the Now dashboard, which is, that student dashboard where they can do a lot of different things related to the university. Those might be things to bookmark over the summer. Also, email planning. You'll see that one is in blue. That is a hyperlink there. So we do have a link to some short videos of how folks can do different things with Outlook. Again, as Jody said, students are not used to navigating email and certainly not Outlook, which is, kind of outdated looking sometimes. So those videos can be a helpful walkthrough of how to do things like personalize some of their settings, set up folders, which can be helpful for classes. And also, as Jody mentioned, doing a scan of their emails regularly and checking for important communications. Email is the official communication of the university, so it is important that students are checking that. Now let's talk about what can be started now. As Jody mentioned, we're in the middle of meeting with students now, hopefully preparing for the fall as well as some summer classes. So, together you and a student can be reviewing those documentation requirements that are in the chat on our website, picking the one that works best. Again, we don't need all 6, just one, and then helping the student obtain a copy of that documentation. Having the student fill out the public accommodation request form and upload their completed documentation. The student then needs to check their UMass email for any next steps or updates from our office. The student would then, schedule the intake meeting. And this is where I'm really going to plug, we really want to meet with students over the summer. We're a small but mighty team. We do as much as we can, but when everyone's trying to make an appointment with us, the first 2 weeks of classes, we just cannot meet with everyone registered. So we really prefer to have those meetings over the summer so people are set up with their accommodations and ready to go in the fall as much as possible. And then finally, together with your student, consider those points of discussion that Jody went over for the intake meeting. And again, you can refer back to slide 11 for details of that.
Okay, we're wrapping up and we're getting to the part where you get to ask questions we didn't cover, but maybe we covered all of it. Who knows? Just beyond the intake, we're here with the students. We have a relationship with them on an ongoing basis. So it's important for students to know and for you to know that students can sign up for a meeting with us at any point in their college career. So they can talk to the disability related guidance meeting is sort of like the catch-all. I am confused about something in my class. I don't know how to tell my professor this, or I'm not sure how to navigate this, or whatever. They can have that whenever. They can just use the same system to make any of the meetings. The other one that we tell students a lot too is, if we set up your accommodations in your first meeting, but if they work for you for the duration of your college experience, great. And if they don't, have a revisit meeting with us. Sometimes students will say, I don't really need that. That's not really part of my major. I don't really have classes that have writing in them, so I don't really think I'm going to need that. oh, it's junior year and now I have a paper because I didn't forgot that I was gonna have to take a history class. You know, and so revisit, you know, it can be a fluid document if things are changing for students and not working. We're gonna have a conversation with them, and we're gonna also have a chance to revisit, well, are you using the accommodation the way you're supposed to be using the accommodation? Let's remember, you know, how this is supposed to play out. We also have just a podcast. It's something that we've been doing for a few years now, where we invite students and faculty and staff to just have stigma reducing conversations about disability. It's really important to our office to not just be those people that give those letters to those students, and that's all we do. We really want the whole campus to be on board with thinking that disability is just another piece of somebody's identity, and that, you know, we want to have these conversations and talk about things. So people can, you know, there's a lot of different topics we talked about and people can find them relatable. As Lauren said, I send out a monthly newsletter to students to give them sort of important dates, any important updates from our office or ones that we think are happening on campus that might be related to that, relevant to them. As well as another way to unpack stigma is I just usually include things that are happening in the news or in the media about disability, just so, you know, we keep kind of being immersed in seeing that disability is not really that big of a deal as far as we're concerned. It's really a component of somebody's life, and we're happy to be part of it with them. There are things that we partner with other offices like career services and the multicultural office and well-being office to just, you know, be reaching out to other students and working together. If you have a student who is, you know, on a social justice, you know, got those bones in them, we do have a disability advisory committee that's about 50 students, faculty, and staff that I run, that we meet monthly. And we really do kind of talk about the overall campus and share perspective, and we learn kind of different things from one another, and, you know, create some initiatives to make sure that we're just making this campus a better place for everybody. The Delta Alpha Pi, the DAPI, is something we'll talk about with your student at the intake meeting, but it's our honor society. It's a national honor society that if a student has had a certain amount of credits here and they achieve a certain GPA at any point in their career in which that happens, we'll invite them to come to an induction ceremony, and they get to wear like some cool stuff with their graduation gowns, and just a chance to give themselves a pat on the back for being a high achieving student while, you know, having a disability and navigating all the various things that college brings. We have a Disability Awareness Week in the spring, where we have a variety of different events that other offices on campus partner with to host. And we have ongoing sort of opportunities for students to engage and learn and be part of workshops and so forth. So, you know, we want the students to stay in touch with us. You know, we sometimes when they meet with us over the summer, we're like one of the first people that they meet with, and we become their people. And so, you know, we want them to have that relationship. Okay, I started with a quote. I'm going to end with a quote. So there's only 2 lasting bequests we can hope to give our children. One of them is roots, and one of them is wings. Okay, we're ready for questions. You're welcome to unmute. You're welcome to pop them in the chat. I am going to just scan the chat real quick and see if we've had anything. I know we kind of threw a lot of chat at